Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer and welcome to Best Kept Plans. Today's video is going to be a look at all of the books that I read in April 2025. If you're interested in seeing what books I read and what I thought about them, please stick around. As I said in my introduction, today's video is going to be all about the books that I read in April 2025. I am filming in a different location than I have been filming in for the last several videos that I've had face on talking about books. It is getting dark though, so I don't know if this was a good decision or not. Hopefully the lighting stays okay for this video. If it starts looking a little wonky as we're moving through, I apologize. I am very excited to talk to you all about the books that I read in April. I do want to start out with a look at my Archer and Olive reading journal. In the month of April, I read a total of 11 books. I read 0 straight physical books. I read 1 book completely digitally. I read 1 book completely on audio only, and then 9 of the books that I read were a combination of audiobook and either digital book or physical book. I read a total of 4,419 pages. That's actually the least amount of pages I've read in a month so far this year. My average rating was 3.81 stars. I read 6 books that were either advanced reading copies or advanced listening copies. I had 3 reads contribute to different reading challenges that I'm doing this year. I read 9 books off of my physical TBR, and I borrowed 6 books from the library. Most of those were actually audiobooks that I borrowed using my Libby or Hoopla apps to listen to along with reading physical books that I had. Before we dive into the books that I did read this month, I did want to comment on the fact that I was able to check off all of the books that were on my April 2025 TBR, which is very exciting because I didn't get to all of my TBR books in March. Now, the first book that we're going to talk about was actually on my TBR for April, and it fulfilled the prompt that was to read a book by an author that I've never read before. And the book that I used was The Bane Witch by Ava Morgyn. I was fortunate enough to receive a digital arc of this. I love a witchy story and I was very much looking forward to this. I feel like the first half of the book, I really liked where the story was going. I was really happy with what the author was doing with the main character as well as the side characters. I thought the mystery element to the story was really interesting and had me very intrigued. But unfortunately, the last third of the book got very messy to me. It felt like the author tried to fit too much conflict into too little space, and because of that, it was very chaotic. It was also really unbelievable, and I know that that's weird to say about a book that has a witchy storyline in it. Even though it had fantastical elements, it was very much grounded in reality, and the ending kind of took me out of that in a sense because there weren't really repercussions for some very serious events that took place. So I didn't love this. I didn't hate it. I'm glad that I read it. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in the month of April was one I was very much looking forward to. This book was also on my TBR, and it fulfilled the prompt that was for me to read a book with over 500 pages, and that book is Gifted and Talented by Olivie Blake. I want to thank Tor for sending me a digital arc of this as well as a physical review copy. I'm so thankful, and I love Olivie Blake. She has become one of my favorite authors. Almost every single one of her books is a 4-star or higher for me, and Gifted and Talented was no exception. This story was so much fun. It's what I would call a modern fantasy or an urban fantasy. Similar to our last book, it's very much a modern world, but there's definitely some fantastical elements going on. There's magic. Our main characters have magic. It is centered around a family and specifically 3 siblings. These people are terrible. They are not likable a lot of the time, but somehow Olivie makes you fall in love with them in a weird way, or at least root for them. And I love that she's able to do that through the power of her writing. I also really, really love that on the naked hardcover of this book, it says, "This book will make you happy," with a smiley face. I thoroughly enjoyed this story and definitely recommend it if you're looking for a fantasy that is a standalone. I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars. After reading Gifted and Talented, I was on a bit of a roll of reading books that were on my TBR, so I decided to keep that trend going and pick up Wrecked by Lauren Asher. This book fulfilled the prompt that was for me to choose a book with an enemies to lovers trope. This is the 3rd book in the Dirty Air series. I did find our male main character to be quite challenging, and for a lot of this story, I found him to be pretty unlikable, which was unfortunate. I don't think this is my favorite book in the Dirty Air series. I'm certainly going to continue the series. I think I only have one more book left, but at the end of the day, I felt like this was pretty forgettable as far as romances go. And so I gave it a 3-star because even though I felt like it was forgettable, I still appreciated and enjoyed our female main character. The next book that I read was a physical ARC that I received from Bramble. I was also fortunate enough to get the advanced listing copy for this as well, and that book is Firebird by Juliette Cross. I had no idea what I was in for with this. I have never heard of this author before. It's a fantasy. I was honestly a little bit worried when I picked it up, but I very quickly realized I did not have a reason to be worried. This was such a fun read. It takes place in a fictional realm where it incorporates mythology as well as like Roman history, and I found that to be very, very enjoyable. This is a fantasy story and it does incorporate dragons, which are very popular in fantasies now, but this story uses dragons in a really, really unique way that I've actually never seen in any other fantasy book that I've read, and that made this really, really exciting, and it definitely helped to keep my attention as I was reading this. I appreciated our female main character. I appreciated the arc that she has in this, but also the overarching story that you can tell is going to play out in the entirety of this series. I don't know what this series is going to be called, but there's definitely a second book coming because there's a little teaser to it at the end of this, and I didn't read the teaser intentionally. I want to wait until the second book is coming out. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Really, really liked it. Unfortunately, I had to take a break from filming earlier to do something else, and when I came back to finish talking about the books that I read in April, the lighting was horrendous, and I tried to come into my room and begin filming immediately. Lighting was even worse, so it is now hours later. I am not using natural light. I'm using the light in my bedroom. I hope it's not terrible. If it is, I apologize. But let's get back into talking about the books that I read in April. After finishing with Firebird, I decided to pick up something different, and I decided to go back to my TBR, and I ended up picking up the book that fulfilled the prompt of reading a book with a historical setting, and that was The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. I have heard nothing but wonderful things about this book, and I've had it for so long that it was really, really great to finally get it off of my physical TBR. This book is really interestingly written. I have not read a book about this specific subject matter, and I really like Brit Bennett's approach here and the perspectives that she chose to tell this story through. I thought that the story did end up having an emotional impact because of how well Bennett puts these characters together, how much depth she gives them, and I really do think this is a great book and definitely recommend this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I went right into another book on my April 2025 TBR, and that book was Heartwood by Amity Gaige. This fulfilled the prompt of reading a book that came out this year. I will be honest with you, this book has not stayed very fresh in my mind since reading it. I actually had to take a peek at the back cover to remind myself exactly what this book is about, and I'm surprised that some recollection of it hasn't remained in my brain, because when I was reading it, I did find the idea of the story to be interesting. This centers around a missing person and the people who are trying to help find her, or people that become involved in the case, in the story, through more interesting means. I overall liked the idea of this book, but I think maybe the execution is where I had a hard time. I think that there were some pacing issues for me, and because of that, it just didn't make the story hit as well as I would have liked it to. I didn't dislike this book though, and I definitely think it's an interesting read. I ended up rating it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was the last book on my April 2025 TBR that I needed to read, and it fulfilled the prompt that was to read a book with over 400 pages, and that book is Firefly Lane by Kristin Hannah. Unfortunately, this book just didn't hit for me, and I think it really comes down to the fact that I found it very challenging to read about one of the characters in this book. I think both of these characters are flawed, and I think that that's intentional, and I think that that's actually great. I think reading about characters that aren't perfect, characters that live a little bit in the gray, characters that make good decisions and poor decisions, I love all of that. I think all of that's very important. But one of the characters in this book in particular just really didn't sit with me well. She just left a really bad taste in my mouth. And because of that, I had a hard time making it through the story, enjoying making it through this story. I'm okay with reading about dislikable people. I did that earlier this month when I read Gifted and Talented, and I ended up loving that book. But somehow Kristin Hannah just doesn't quite pull it off. Because of that, I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. I do think I need to maybe take a break from Kristin Hannah because I'm thinking she may not be the author for me. Having read all of the books on my TBR, I decided to pick up something that I've been eyeing for a while and have been really looking forward to diving into. And that book was What Lies Beyond the Veil by Harper L. Woods. This is the first book in the Of Flesh and Bone series, and this is currently in the process of getting re-released by Bramble. So thank you so much to Bramble for sending me this review copy with some fun red sprayed edges. I enjoyed this book. We're definitely dealing with a complex world, but I think Woods does a great job of giving us what we need and not giving us so much that we're overwhelmed. I also did like our female main character. She's definitely at a point where she feels very disheartened by the way women are treated and viewed in the society she's living in, and that factors a lot into her character, which I really appreciated. I also thought our male main character was very interesting. There is a significant twist at the end of this book, which I did see coming, but was still really good and definitely leaves you wanting more of this series. I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars, and because it left me wanting more, I ended up picking up the second book in the series right away, which is called What Hunts Inside the Shadows. Thank you again to Bramble for sending me the finished review copy of this book. This one has pretty purple sprayed edges, and I'm still surprised about how much I liked this book. This book definitely dives deeper into the relationship between our main characters. There's a lot of back and forth challenges in their relationship throughout this book, which I normally wouldn't like. But the way that Woods approaches it, she makes that back and forth make sense because of the fantastical elements we're dealing with and the fantastical elements that directly impact their relationship. There's also a ton of spice in this book, and I think that you should know that before going into it. There was so much steam in this book, and I probably could have done with less of it, but I also didn't mind it when it was there. And that was also surprising to me. I do think that this story leaves off on an even more intriguing point than the first book in the series. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I do really, really want to dive into the third book in the series. I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to get a review copy of it. I got a review copy of the fourth book in the series, so I don't know if there's just an issue with mail being delayed or if I happen to not be getting the third book in the series. Regardless, I'm going to figure out how to get my hands on the third book in the series because because I want to read it, and I'm hoping to get to it in the month of May and then continue on with the fourth book since I do already have it. And yeah, I'm invested. After finishing with the second book in the Of Flesh and Bone series, I decided to break my book buying ban to pick up Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I did actually get the audiobook for this from Penguin Random House Audio, and so thank you to them for that, but I wasn't able to read it or listen to it before the book actually came out. And so I was hearing what other people were saying about this story, and I heard a lot of people saying that this was definitely her least romance heavy book or least romantic book, that it read much more like literary fiction or women's fiction. And I will say that overall, I actually feel like Emily Henry books tend to read more like literary fiction or women's fiction with a subplot of romance, and that's something that I'm very okay with. I feel similarly about Abby Jimenez, and that's part of why I really love Sophie Kinsella's books, and so that wasn't off-putting to me in any way. I was also a little nervous about reading this book because I did not really enjoy Funny Story. I think I rated it 4 stars, and I actually went back and ended up rereading it at like a 3 or a 3.5 because I just didn't really connect with it, and maybe it was just that I wasn't in the mood for it when I read it, but that's probably my least favorite Emily Henry book, and so I was intrigued to see how I was going to feel about this new release and if I was going to like it more, or if maybe I'm just falling out of love with Emily Henry's writing. And I'm actually really pleased to say that I absolutely love this book, and this was a 5 out of 5 star read for me. This is hands down my favorite Emily Henry book. Now, prior to reading this book, I had never rated an Emily Henry book 5 stars. I did read Beach Read prior to rating books, and I do think that I probably would have rated that book at 5 out of 5 stars, but I do like this book more than I can remember liking Beach Read when I read it. It's also really interesting that people say that this is her least romance heavy book, because I don't feel that way at all. To me, the romance was front and center, and I actually really loved the romance. I loved the dynamic between our two main characters. Their chemistry felt very palpable to me, and I'm just so happy I read this book. I did not have any 5-star reads in February. I had 1 5-star read in March. I hadn't had any in April, and so it was very exciting to find a book that I loved as much as I love this. And again, 5 out of 5 stars. Highly recommend if you haven't read this yet. And then the last book that I read in the month of April was actually something I listened to exclusively on audio, and that was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. This is the second book in the Wayward Children series. I read the first book in March and really enjoyed it, and I actually really enjoyed this one as well. We're actually following characters that we meet in the first book in the series, but the events in this book take place prior to what happens in the first book. And so it's a little bit of a history lesson into these two characters, and I found them to be very interesting characters to follow. I really liked the focus on a sibling relationship, on sibling dynamics. I liked what this book said about nature versus nurture. I liked what this book said about the role of parental decision making in shaping the psyche of children, and overall this was just a really fun read, and it makes me even more excited to continue on with the Wayward Children's series. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. Now that we've talked about all of the books that I read in April, I did want to quickly touch upon my top 3 books that I read in the month. And I will say that my number 3 spot was really hard to choose between like 3 different books, but I ended up deciding to go with Firebird by Juliette Cross because of how unique I thought this story was and how excited it made me to continue on with this series when the second book gets published. My number 2 favorite book of the month was Gifted and Talented by Olivie Blake. This was my only 4.5 out of 5 star read of the month. I love this book. Always love Olivie Blake. She's becoming one of my favorite authors. And then of course you all know that my favorite book of the month was Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. This was my 1 5-star read, and again, please read it if you haven't already. It's so good. And that is it. That is the end of me talking about the books that I read in April 2025. I hope that you all enjoyed this video. If you have read any of the books that I talked about in this video, please do not hesitate to put some spoiler-free thoughts down below. I love chatting with people about books. And as always, everyone, please be safe. Bye-bye.